Hello, and thank you for joining us for Long Beach Symphony's Musically Speaking series, hosted by our music director, Eckart Preu. I'm Kelly Lucia, president of the Long Beach Symphony, and we are so excited to bring you this virtual series featuring interviews with world-class performers, conductors, and composers. This evening, we are thrilled to welcome former Long Beach Symphony guest, pops artist, crossover violinist, and actress Lucia Micarelli. And now, please welcome to our virtual stage, friend of Long Beach Symphony, the very talented Lucia Micarelli.
Hi.
Hi. Thank you so much, Kelly, and thank you, Lucia, for being here with us today and talking to us today. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I had such a great time when you performed with us, the Long Beach Symphony. It feels like yesterday, but it was actually in October 2019. Good times.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, all musicians, just by the nature of our art form, we start playing our instruments early in life, usually around 5 years old. That's kind of when I started. That's kind of when everybody starts. But you started super early at age 3 with dance and a piano and violin. What are some early moments when you really started to feel a connection to music in particular? I mean, did music making come natural to you? Because it didn't come natural to me. So that's why I'm asking.
It still doesn't feel entirely natural to me. Well, first of all, I did start when I was 3. It wasn't as if I, was 3 and was asking for it or trying to do it on my own. My mom was very determined that I was going to play an instrument. And she actually wanted me to play piano. I think she had always wanted to take piano lessons, and she was sort of obsessed with classical musicians. And so when I turned 3, she took me to the local Suzuki school. At the time, I lived in Queens, in New York, and tried to get me started on piano lessons. And they said that my hands were too small and that I should wait a year and come back the next year. And she was like, "What can she start right now?" So they said I could start violin, and I started violin. I did take ballet and tap as well, but you made it sound much grander than it actually was. I was definitely not good at them at all, at all. And with the violin, I don't remember starting because I was so little, but I do remember that sort of once I got through the Suzuki books and once I was playing, more real repertoire, I just remember that I felt very emotional, like playing. I felt very, very emotional. And I remember a lot of adults sort of being surprised and always being like, how does she look so sort of emotive and so like intense? And how does she have these kinds of feelings when she's so young? So I'm not sure if it was. I remember that I felt very emotional, but I didn't really have a lot of like life experience and context to be creating these stories around the music in. But I do know that I definitely I felt emotionally connected to music, and like all other kids too, I liked having a thing that was like my thing that I could get attention for. But I also, by the time I was probably like 6, I had decided that this was what I was going to do. I don't know. I felt very strongly that it was for me. I enjoyed it, and I had a great, I would get really nervous, but I enjoyed performing, and I enjoyed practicing. I enjoyed working on it, and I don't know. I started to hate practicing later.
Well, I'm just surprised because I had a totally different set of experiences myself and also emotions myself, because a lot of my childhood memories of practicing and singing, they were not beautiful or cute at all. I cried most of the time, actually all the time, because it was kind of, I didn't want to practice. I didn't want to sing. It was like my first encounter with discipline.
Mm-hmm.
And I hated that part.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really, really, really painful in many ways. Did you have moments like that at all? Or it was really just something that, you're saying that you emoted. and that you felt this deep connection to it. I think was this just a kind of a personal expression then for you?
I think so. I mean, I just remember I had a really cool when I started with Suzuki, but then within a couple years, we moved from Queens to Hawaii, and I started studying with a couple different violin teachers. And I had a really, really, really cool. I had two really amazing women that I was studying with. One was Cheryl Showett, and one was Catherine Leuchtenberg. And they were so cool. Where they sort of they would let me like learn the slow movements of big concertos, because I couldn't play. So I learned the second movement of Tchaikovsky concerto when I was like 7 or 8, and I learned second movement of Wieniawski concerto. Like I learned a lot of these second movements, and it's really beautiful music, and I did really fall in love with that stuff. I don't know if that's why even now I always prefer a ballad, but in response to what you were saying, I mean I do understand your experience. When I was very little, I enjoyed practicing and I enjoyed playing. And then, of course, as it became more serious and as I got older and, started to be interested in like friends and boys and whatever else, I did definitely struggle with the discipline and with practicing later on. I would say like, early teens or like 12, 13, 14, it was much more, it felt much heavier and there was a lot more tension and frustration with, not having to work so hard and not being as good as I wanted to be. Whereas when I was younger, it all was, I don't know, there wasn't as much pressure around it. And I just really liked having a thing, having my own thing.
I mean, you mentioned when you were 6, and I read that at age 6 you had your debut as a soloist with the Honolulu Symphony Orchestra. So I was thinking, well, maybe she really was a child prodigy, in the best sense of the word, which I mean, it's quite extraordinary for a 6-year-old to play anything with an orchestra. What an opportunity! I still was stuck at Twinkle Twinkle at that time. What do you remember about that experience at all?
Well, I mean, it was a youth competition, and the prize was I didn't perform an entire concerto. I think I only performed one movement.
The slow movement.
Huh?
The slow movement.
I think I performed a first movement. I can't remember exactly. What I do remember is, so it was a youth competition, and the winner got to perform with the orchestra at a youth concert. And this is at Blaisdell in Honolulu. And so the coolest part about it was that the whole audience was all kids my age too. And my class from my elementary school was there as well, but it was like all just kids on a field trip. And so that was really cool. I don't know if they liked it, but I thought the whole thing was so fun because it felt like it was just like me hanging out with kids my age. I mean, I remember being really nervous. I remember that I fell on my face when I walked out. I tripped on something and fell. And apparently I held my violin up over my head so I wouldn't smash it. I don't remember a whole lot. I did really enjoy performing at a young age. I don't know how it sounded. I doubt it sounded very good.
It's kind of funny that you still already at that age had these typical violinist reactions, like take my life, but keep my violin safe. That you had already that instinct.
I'm sure my mother told me. I'm sure somebody told me to do that. I don't think I came up with it on my own.
Yeah. But I mean, so you were, as I understand it, you were really set for a career as a classical soloist. You studied at Juilliard. But with one of the most important violin pedagogues of the time, Dorothy DeLay. You took lessons with Itzhak Perlman, with Pinchas Sugarman. You won competitions at Juilliard and also at Aspen. I mean, all that really points towards a straightforward career as kind of international violin virtuoso. But then, while you studied at Juilliard, do all this stuff, you began playing at bars and playing non-classical music regularly. I mean, what happened? Was this just your adventurous 20-some-year-old kicking in, or was it musically related? What was it?
I mean, I went to Juilliard pre-college when I was 11.
Okay.
So by the time I went to college, I had already been in a conservatory environment for quite a long time. Also, there was an element of, yeah, I mean, I obviously we felt like, or I felt like I was on some kind of a track of sorts, but as as with all life, we always think we have a plan, and it just doesn't ever quite, it's not quite the way that you expected. Or if you do get to the thing you were trying to get to, it turns out to not be how you thought it would be, or it doesn't feel the way you thought it would feel. So, but by the time I went to college, I think I had a lot of this conservatory mindset. I had this experience really early in college where a friend of mine, who was a classical musician but also improvised and also played with like rock bands and stuff, um, asked me if I would fill in for this gig that he had with like an R&B band in like Philadelphia. It paid like really little. Anyway, and I was like, sure, that sounds fun. I always had really admired this friend of mine who, could play concertos and also improvised and like played jazz. Like he had sat in with like Ornette Coleman, and like he felt, super comfortable in all these different genres. And I always just thought that was so cool. I couldn't do any of that stuff, and I was fascinated by it. And he knew that I was fascinated, and so he asked me to like fill in on this R&B gig, and it was his way of sort of tossing me like just a different experience and seeing how I did. And I was in this rehearsal with this band in this rehearsal space in New York, and they played through one of the songs that they had wanted me to play on. It's like real simple, there's only a few chord changes. It's like very standard sort of R&B pop song. And they played through it once, and they were like, okay, so, play something. Play something. And I just didn't know what to do. They played through the song again, and I didn't know, because nobody had written me a part, and nobody told me what to play. And I didn't know, I just was frozen. And at one point, the bass player like looked over, and he was gentle. He wasn't being mean, but he looked over and he was like, did you say you went to Juilliard? And, that experience, it wasn't so much that it was embarrassing. I've just found myself feeling like, I have had all this training, and thinking too about like everyone I knew, all my peers were also classical musicians. I'd never been around a musician that wasn't a classical musician. This idea of how we sort of have all this training from such a young age and learn about all this incredible music and these composers of the highest level, and then then to try and just make up a little violin part on a 3-chord R&B song, there's some kind of like weird block. I mean, it's not, I was like, I know that it's not that I can't do it. I have the skills, but why can't I translate the information that I've learned into something that's going to work here? And it really frustrated me. And so then I just became very interested in trying to learn about other kinds of music, trying to improvise, trying to be in what in my mind was a sort of more well-rounded musician. I just didn't like this feeling of like, wow, I do this one thing, but I can't even use it. I can't even really communicate with other musicians in different fields, and I wanted to be able to use it as a language and have these kinds of conversations. And so it really came out of that. And then I did a little bit of that, and then ended up, getting a job to go on tour with Trans-Siberian Orchestra. And I mean, I just took that honestly because I wanted to make some money, and it sounded really cool to go on tour. I'd never been on tour, and it was like we're going to play Christmas rock music in arenas for 6 weeks. I'm like, sure. I was like 20. I'm like, of course, that sounds fun. And that tour led to another tour. And so it wasn't by design. I didn't fall off the classical trail necessarily by design. It all just, one experience led to another.
I was wondering if it was, either burnout or a rebellion, that you kind of said, I've done this for so long, I want to do something else. But you actually pointed something really, really important out, and that is one of the shortcomings, one of the big shortcomings in all classical music education is that, improvisation is not being taught, is not being encouraged. And that used to be such an integral part of, like hundreds of years ago. It was just, that's what you did. You improvise. You sit down, you sight read, and you improvise. So you branched off with the Siberian Trans-Siberian Orchestra, and so how did this connection with Chris Body and Barbra Streisand and Josh Groban, how did that all happen? I mean, was that the natural next step, or was it just by chance you met someone who knew someone?
Honestly, it's just so many things that have, and so much of my musical path has just sort of been that I got that Trans-Siberian Orchestra job. I was on this tour for 6 weeks. I'd never been on tour before. I never never played in an arena before. It was hilarious. I had a great time. And then out of the blue, the last week, I think, that I was on that tour, my cell phone rings. It's an unknown number. I answer it. This guy goes, "Hi, is this Lucia? This is Josh Groban." I didn't know who he was. I'd never heard of him before. He said that he had been recommended me by another violinist, and that someone had recommended me. He was looking for a violinist to go on tour with him. He was going to do his first tour, and he had he wanted a violinist, but he had a specific piece that was a duet that he had recorded with Joshua Bell called Micarelli with Jeremy Lubbock. Did a beautiful arrangement, and so he needed something, and that was classical. So he was looking for someone to do that. Anyway, just asked me if I was interested. I said yes. He was like, "Okay, we have to audition. Can you make a tape? If I send you some music, can you learn it and make a videotape?" So he sent me some music. I printed it out. I had somebody else on the tour help me make a videotape of me playing Micarelli in the back of this tour bus, and then he called me a couple weeks later and told me I got the job. That was totally random, And so I went straight from Trans-Siberian. When that ended, I went straight to production rehearsals for Josh's tour. Then while on Josh's tour, I mean, on the first tour was when I got my first record deal. I ended up getting signed to Warner Reprise, which was Josh's label, and that was from the label execs and his produced people seeing me performing with him. But on the second tour, was it the second tour? The second tour that I did with him, so it was a while later, Chris Bode was an opening act, came on as an opening act. And I was just like so excited to meet the band. Like, it was so different than what Josh does, and it was so different from what I had experienced. I mean, I had heard jazz, but I hadn't seen. It was such an amazing band, and just to see that level of music making live, like every night right in front of me, and I was just super excited. And so I just became friends with that band, and obviously we all saw each other playing stuff. That's how I met Chris, but I didn't end up, I met Chris there, and then it was like, I don't remember how long later, but quite a while later, that Chris reached out to me and asked me if I would play a duet with him. He said that he was having somebody arrange a song for the two of us to do, and that he had a show. He just said, I'm doing a show that's going to be videotaped for TV, and I want you to do a duet with me. And that ended up being Emmanuel, and the show was his PBS special, which was all duets, except everybody else was a way bigger deal than me. He just didn't tell me. I had no idea. So we worked on that song together, and then when I went out to Boston to do this thing with him, all of a sudden I was like, oh my God, like Steven Tyler's here, and Yo-Yo Ma's here, and Sting is here, and John Mayer, like, what's going on? Like, who are these people? How is this happening? And that, and I ended up doing that. So a lot of things have all just been, to meet people, you play with people, they think of something, I don't know. And also just being willing to do something that you maybe never thought you would do, or not sure you even know how to do. There's a lot of that. I've done a lot of that, of kind of like someone being like, why don't you come on tour with us? Or why don't you come play with our prog rock band or our jazz band? And I'm kind of like, I have no idea how to do that, but okay, like, we'll try. So that part of things has definitely influenced me.
So when you're in rehearsal with Chris Body or Josh Groban, how do these rehearsals feel, or what like, is this like chamber music, like what we classical musicians feel like chamber music? Everybody does a little bit, it's a give and take, or is there a boss? Whatever Josh says, that's what it's done. Or what is your musical responsibility, and how much say do you have, or what is the dynamic there in these small groups that play together for so long?
I mean, it's really it's different in every situation. I mean, it's just like in our classical world. Every work environment is different, and a lot of it is just dependent on whatever the personality is of the person at the top. And so some people, like in Josh's case, Josh was so young when he started. He had a musical director who was a member of the band, but who was sort of the person who would like make sure that the arrangements were gelling, or kind of make executive decisions about who should do what, blah, blah, blah. And like Josh could talk to him about, what he wasn't happy with, but very rarely did Josh give any of the musicians like direct orders. But that's just his style, And then in Bodhi's situation, I mean, Bodhi didn't have a musical director, and he's just gonna go up and talk to whoever and say like, hey, play this like this. Like, well, we're not gonna do that song. Why don't you do? I need less movement in the piano. I need like some. Let's make a different breakdown in the middle of this. So it's always different. I mean, touring with Barbara is like just so incredibly detail oriented and just has the most insane ears. I was really blown away by her. I don't know what I expected, but I didn't expect her to be such a finely tuned, I mean, it's not that I didn't expect her to, obviously I know she's a great musician, but she just had such amazing ears. When I worked with her, there was an entire orchestra that she was on tour with. And we would be in rehearsal, and she could hear, if like the second clarinetist played a wrong note, she could hear it, and she would be like, let's try doing this chord, and she'll like revoice a chord, and like just standing there and tell like, let's try this chord instead, which is like pretty impressive. She's a really small little lady, and for her to do, I don't know, she was, so it varies. Some artists crack the whip themselves, and other artists are very, very much not involved. Some artists are just like, I just want to be able to walk into the situation and have it sound like, whatever demo I've been listening to that I'm used to. And other people want to create a completely different show every night. It's the same. It's like some artists have a program that they don't stray from, and others will randomly call out some song and the band has to play it. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's sort of, I don't know if that answers your question.
Awesome. Yeah, no, totally. One of the biggest fears musicians have, is an injury that might impact our abilities to work and play, something that would put our, the whole dedication and purpose of our lives at risk. And I hear that on one of these tours, you had a major accident that drastically impacted your playing. Do you mind telling us a little bit about that?
No, I mean, well, it ultimately ended up not drastically impacting my playing, thankfully. But yeah, I was on tour with Chris Bodhi, and we were playing a private event in Italy. And after the show, I was backstage. I still had my gown on. I was walking around backstage with the band. I was holding a glass, and I tripped on my dress, and I landed on the wine glass. And I went to the emergency room in Italy, and then just came back to LA right away. And it turned out I severed 3 nerves in my left hand. I don't know if you can see, but I have like, I don't know. This is like the scar. Anyway, so I severed 3 nerves. I severed a nerve to the inside of this thumb. I severed a nerve here, and then I severed a nerve in my pinky. And I had surgery, and then I was in a cast for 6 weeks or 8 weeks. And we knew that it wasn't tendons or ligaments, but nerves is feeling. And at the time, I didn't, no one could really, I kept being like, will I be able to play, at the same level, or will I be able to? It was just no one really knew what the impact of not having feeling would be on my playing, and I thought that it would be huge because in my mind I'm like, well, if I can't feel, like, how do I? And that's my left hand. Like, how do I do anything? I mean, I don't know. I got out of the cast. I did a lot of physical therapy. I pushed really hard. I still don't have full feeling in those fingers. It turns out that it doesn't bother me as much as I thought. But I have talked to other people who've had nerve injuries in their hands, and just because of the placement, or just because of, for whatever, or sometimes because of the instrument, it has been a major issue. I think I just got really lucky. I mean, I still don't have full feeling, but I have full mobility. I never really notice the feeling part of it when I'm playing. I notice it more when I'm like folding laundry, or, like when I'm touching stuff. But it was really scary. And during that time, it was just the first time in my life that it ever even occurred to me that I might not play the violin, or that might not be the thing that I do. And there's all kinds of like weird identity stuff wrapped up in that, and like, who am I and all that. And so I got really, really lucky. But it was good to have that in a way too, because I think that I don't take it for granted. I don't take it for granted anymore that I can play, and I try to be aware of how much I enjoy it, because it's easy to, like, when you do the thing, even though we're also lucky to like get to do the thing that we love, when you do it for a living, it's really easy to just sort of, it's a job, and you're not like all the time just like, this is so, I'm really enjoying this experience. It's really easy to like check out of the experiences and just kind of be like, well, no, I have to go work like in Tuscany or what, on this arena stage. And since then, I think I'm much more sort of present and try to, focus on the work, but also take a step back and recognize that I'm having an unusual experience and a lovely experience, and that isn't it amazing to be having these kinds of experiences because of music? And, I may not always be able to play, and I'm grateful for being able to now.
And speaking of artistic identity, besides being a musician, you're also an actress or actor, depending on what you prefer. So most recently in 2020, you starred as the lead in The Christmas Bow. But apparently you started out, over 10 years ago in this HBO series, and I think it's pronounced Treme.
Yeah.
I had to Google that, how to pronounce it. There's many YouTube clips about how to Treme. And so, but there you play Annie, and you were kind of immersed in music like jazz, bluegrass, and Cajun fiddle music, and so. Was that a challenge for you? But you've already been playing other styles. So I mean, how do you balance these two parts of playing, being a musician and being an actress? What is more difficult for you when you are on set, for instance?
Everything is difficult. No, I at the time, I think my experience with Treme was that, I had never acted before. I never even thought about acting before. I actually got the call when I first got called by Alexa Fogel, who's the casting director from HBO for that show. That was right while I was hurt. That was while I was in the cast. So I'm sitting there like contemplating, my identity and what my value is to me or anyone else if I'm not a musician. And then randomly my manager gets this call from this casting director that says that they're looking for a violinist for this series that David Simon wrote. David Simon is a very, very well-respected and amazing TV writer, and they were just they had a character of a violinist, and David likes to use real people mixed in with his actors, so they wanted to use a real violinist, and they had like found me on YouTube. And I at the time thought, I was like, well, it's TV music, right? So maybe this is good. Like, if I can somehow get this job, like, that way I can have a job. And if I'm not playing when I get out of the cast, if I'm not playing at a level where I can play like classical music, maybe I can play this other music, which now I look back and I'm like, that was such a narrow-minded idea. But anyway, it did really motivate me to try, to try and audition well for that thing. And I did get the job. And then by the time we started filming, my hand was healed and I was playing fine. But I was so focused on like thinking that the music part was going to be so easy and the acting part was, and the acting part was challenging because I didn't know what the hell I was doing. And acting's weird. Having a bunch of cameras on you is weird, and having a bunch of people, and like saying things that what you're gonna say, but trying to act like you're just saying it. Acting's weird. But the music element of that project ended up being so challenging and so rich, really, really, like, just so beautiful. Because New Orleans, I just didn't know. I had been through New Orleans a couple times. I'd never spent much time there. I wasn't aware of how much musical culture there was there and what a melting pot it is. Like, I really thought that when I started the show, I thought that New Orleans music was like its own genre, like a genre of jazz or something. And that was the style of music that I would do while I was doing a show about New Orleans. But it's not like New Orleans is all kinds of music. There's like fiddle influences, and then there's like R&B, and there's bounce, and there's like all kinds of like weird indie like hip hop and like trad jazz and brass band and all kinds of stuff all happening in this one place. And my character was a street musician, and so David Simon loves New Orleans, had spent 10 years hanging out there, and also loves music, and had in those 10 years that he had been spending time in New Orleans, he had made friends with so many musicians and had become fans of so many bands. So he was really focused on trying to get as many of his friends on the show as possible and as much live music on the show as possible. And my character was the one that, where it would make sense that I would be sitting in with all these different bands. So every week it was like a different, like this week I'm doing trad jazz, next week I'm sitting in with a Cajun band, the week after that I'm playing I'm playing on the street with this pianist, or I'm doing ragtime, and it was just really overwhelming, but so amazing, to learn all that stuff, to have that kind of crash course, and also so amazing to discover a city through its musicians. Like, because of my role and because of music, the way that my experience of New Orleans was mostly through these musicians that I met, that I learned from, and they would teach me about their styles. And people were so generous. Like, I'd show up to like a rehearsal, and I'd just donk it, like just completely, like just be failing miserably. And people would give me lists of who I should be listening to, like what I should listen to, and why don't you come and sit in with us like tonight and try again, because we only have like 4 days until we have to shoot this. They were so generous and like helpful, and everybody wanted to help me and teach me stuff, and I wanted to learn. And so I learned so much, and I had such a really, really amazing time, like learning the culture and learning the city with music sort of, and musicians being my guide. So yeah, that was a really, really fascinating experience. I'm very grateful to David for that. And that's another thing that I never thought I would do something like that. And then all of a sudden, to have that experience, and it was really, really fun, and I learned a lot.
Yeah, yeah. My last question before we go to the Q&A. So when you played with us in Long Beach, we noticed that you have an interesting performance habit. I don't know if it's a habit, but that's what you do. You play a barefoot. And I'm sure you get this question all the time. When did you start doing that? And particularly after your glass incident, and why? Does it help you feel like vibrations? What is the reasoning behind that?
I started doing that when I was touring with Josh Groban, so a long, long time ago. And, the context of that, in that moment, there was some choreography in his show. I was supposed to like walk up some stairs while I was playing, and he's supposed to like chase me while he's singing, and then I'm playing and we're up and down stairs, and I don't know. And we had our first show, and I tried to do this with the heels and playing, and it was like I'm like a strolling violinist going up and down stairs, and it was I just like couldn't concentrate on playing and didn't know what was going on. And I just went to him in intermission and asked, if he was really attached to me like wearing heels, or and I didn't have any flats or anything in the moment. He was like, it's you do whatever makes you comfortable. And for whatever reason, I just thought, I would feel really good being barefoot. Like I would feel, I don't know, grounded and myself. I would feel natural and obviously much more comfortable. And I just started doing that on that tour. And then it's just a thing that I've just continued doing, because at this point it feels it's for me. It's definitely for me. It does help me to feel more confident. I mean, practically too, it just helps me feel a lot more stable and I feel like I can concentrate better. I just feel more like myself and very natural, and everything feels more organic, and I feel like I can concentrate better and not feel like I put on this outfit for everybody and now I'm gonna try and wear this outfit and play these notes. So I don't know, there's just something about it that helps me to feel centered.
Yeah. I wish I could do that.
You can.
I would be the first conductor to conduct barefoot, but I don't think I would be accepted in the orchestra.
By who? What is the shoe police? You can do whatever you want.
I don't know. Well, thank you so much. Let's hand it over to Kelly, who will lead the Q&A portion.
Thank you both for allowing us to be part of such a fun and interesting interview. We have lots of folks who've submitted questions in the Q&A box, and we're going to get to just a few. Lucia, the first one is from Charles. He'd like to know, what is your daily practice regimen, and has it changed during the course of the last year?
Yeah, I'm practicing a lot more over the last year. That's been nice. So I don't know, daily what I get up to these days, probably somewhere between 3 and 4 hours, though, maybe that last hour is taken up by like bathroom breaks and eating cheese and stuff. I don't know. But of that time, I have a sort of a little scales and arpeggios and Sevchek little routine that I do that takes about anywhere from like 35 to 45 minutes. I always start with that. I don't feel like I can really play anything if I don't warm up. I don't know if that's because I'm like older now. I didn't used to feel like that, but now I really like nothing works unless I spend some time playing scales. So yeah, usually I start with that. That's how I get going, and then I'll work on whatever repertoire that I'm working on or interested in. I don't have much of a routine other than the scales and the Sevchek. Outside of that part, it's just whatever I feel like I need to work on, and also how I work on things. Again, is not like set in stone. It's just however, some days I won't play anything at tempo at all for the entire time that I'm playing. There's some days I just decide today we're just doing everything slowly. Today we're doing everything with no vibrato. Other days I'm just like running passages over and over and over again. It all depends. But the warming up part and then making yourself do it every day, those are the only routine things.
Great. And Bob would like to know, Lucia, in what ways is your playing these days different or similar to how you played 5 to 10 years ago? And Eckart, if you could answer the same about conducting.
I mean, I think I've always been emotional. I think it's always come from a very like emotionally that's sort of a touchstone for me, and that's really like my drive and my goal when I'm playing. Other than that, I would hope that I play better than I did 5 to 10 years ago. I don't really know, in terms of how I've changed. I mean, I have had a lot, I'm just trying to think of what are the experiences that I've had in the last 5 to 10 years and how, I didn't start doing my own solo shows until the last 5 to 10 years. So I'm sure that doing my own solo shows and having that kind of performance experience, you know, has changed my playing, hopefully for the better. Hopefully, just having that kind of experience where all eyes are on you and you're like playing something difficult. But I think hopefully the emotionality is still there. But Eckhart, how's your conducting changed?
Well, we all hope that we're getting better, right? That's the most important thing. Now, I feel, I mean, as a conductor, maybe more so than a violinist, but maybe, I don't know. We feel age creeping in. You not yet, but I do. And so when you're a young conductor, I mean, you can be a hothead and you have all the muscles and you have all the energy, everything in the world, and you have spades of it. Um, After a while, the body says, I don't think so anymore, and so you try. And I think that's why conductors used to be the good conductors, and they still are. They used to be the old ones, because they distill it down to the absolute essence, where they can achieve the same or more results with a gesture like this than the big one, where you almost pull your arm out. And I think it's all really about distilling it down to the absolute essence. And I'm observing that with myself too, just because you have to. I cannot conduct like a 20-year-old. It's just impossible. And I think by doing that, you allow the orchestra to give more.
Mm.
And I think they understand. I think it's you ease up on the communication if you talk less, if you yell less in their faces physically. I think you enable them to say more themselves.
Oh, yeah. Have you had any conducting injuries?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
What happened? What
Oh
happened?
well, I mean, I mean, you know it as a violinist, the repetitive motion.
Yeah.
After a while, our body is not built to do this motion. It's 10,000 times a day, every day. It's just not. And as a conductor too. So you kind of have to kind of, yeah, you have to kind of manage your body. A lot of people have neck injuries, shoulder injuries,
Yeah.
elbows, tennis elbow thingies. So yeah, but
It's not like you could just like, yeah, that's scary. That's
yeah,
scary.
yeah.
Okay.
All right, we have time. There's so many questions, and we're going to get to one more. John is curious. He commented that my wife and I so enjoyed your Pops concert with the Long Beach Symphony, which seems like a million years ago, but it was only a year and a half ago. What was that experience like for you?
Oh, it was so much fun. It was so much fun. It had been, we were talking earlier before this. Um, that had just been such a dream of mine for so long to sort of do that kind of a program with in an orchestral setting, and then Eckhart's amazing. I had so many friends in the Long Beach Symphony too. I live in LA, and so I have so many friends in the symphony. So that was amazing, and I don't know. There were just so many things about it. Your audience is so incredible. Your audiences are really special, and so it was really fun. And then because of these other personal things, I felt very supported and connected, and it was amazing to have friends on stage with me, and you, like Eckhart, working with you was a breeze, and I felt so, I just felt great. You were super fun, and I had a great time. I mean, I would love to do that again. It was really, and it was so epic. I mean, I knew that an orchestral version of anything is going to be, it's going to be the biggest one. But that feeling of being on stage, and even there were quite a few things that I didn't even play on, but the just the way that it feels physically, the way the sound feels physically. I mean, I know Eckhart experiences this all the time. It sounds weird when I'm saying it, but the way the sound feels physically when it's that many people and coming out is really something. And it felt so sort of epic. And I'm so, my solo show, normally it's a small ensemble. I have a chamber ensemble. It's either a quartet or it's a sextet. So I'm just not used to there being that much physical sort of power and this like, and that was really fun. So I loved it. I'm glad that they enjoyed it, but I had a great time.
Well, our audience adores you. So thank you very much. We're so happy that you came and joined us.
Well, thank you, Kelly. Thank you.
So that was the unfortunately the last question we have time for today. And I'd like to thank our audience for your great questions and for tuning into Musically Speaking. We look forward to bringing you our next program in a few weeks featuring Hollywood film composers Nan Schwartz and Conrad Pope.
Yay.
And thank you so much to Eckart and Lucia for joining us today. We really enjoyed learning more about you both. And Lucia, we look forward to having you with us again soon at the Long Beach Symphony.
Wow, me too. Thank you so much, Kelly. Thank you, Eckart.
Thank
It's
you,
a
Lucia.
pleasure to see you.
You too.
Thank you, everyone, and be well.
Bye.